Welcome to Misfits and Mystics podcast, where we have conversations intersecting faith, mental health, artistry, and social justice. We're so glad you're here. So get cozy.
But not too cozy, because we do keep it real on this podcast.
Listen with care.
And enjoy.
Do I look good, my dear? Do I look good today? All right, I'm done.
That was beautiful.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Actually, it's good evening.
I know, but good morning.
Okay. Well, guys, this is not a typical episode because somebody forgot their laptop.
Somebody did what?
Somebody forgot their laptop.
You know what? Let me explain why. Even though I don't really know why, but I'm just going to put reason into it.
Speak up.
Because niggas is stressed. Okay?
Okay.
So it must have been my subconscious telling me, you know what? Leave it. That way, you don't have to do nothing tonight. Ain't no way you can grade anything because everything is online. Fuck that shit. I'm out. And I just truly believe that that's what my brain was thinking. And so my body just followed suit, you know? You feel me?
I feel you, but it didn't want to tell you that, hey, maybe you should bring your laptop so we can record.
No, it didn't.
I feel you. Well, that's fine, because there are other ways, as you see.
Facts.
True facts. So and then my laptop decided, screw you.
Seriously.
So, I'm recording this on my phone, and Alicia is being FaceTimed. So, if the sound sounds like shit, then y'all hear what we saying. Like, and we'll get into this later, but we're about to take a hiatus anyway. This is probably a sign that we need to take a rest. But not until we finish up what we have planned. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. Woosah. Welcome back to Misfits and Mystics podcast. Talking about artistry today and trauma and creating. But before we get into that, let's just first give a brief recap about our week. How have you been, Alicia?
I'm sorry. I have been, okay? I've been. So we're just going to say that. I've been.
Yes.
How about you?
I've been. I saw, kick some ass. I am still recovering from Pride weekend in a good way.
I was about to say, what?
Yeah, it's just like it was very fun and beautiful, and if you guys listen to the bonus episode we put out on Tuesday, then you know that I had a grand old time. It was just a lot because it was hot, so you're in the sun all day, which can drain you, and when you have so much fun and then you have to come back to reality and realize, oh yeah, regular life resumes, and there's this like hint of depression that kicks in, so yeah, I kind of experienced that a little bit on Monday, and yes, I'm recovering, but I have been very great. I am so happy that I went to Pride both days. I saw TLC on Sunday. And when I tell you, Chili is a whole vibe. a whole mood. She stays right in the pocket.
Yes, girl.
Like, never leaves.
I love it.
She's gorgeous. T-Boz's voice, like, how? That's like none but God, okay? Just all in her throat. I just, woo! And they sang all of our favorites. No Scrubs, Red Light Special, yes. Waterfalls, baby, baby, baby.
Hey, hey. That's my shit.
Listen, they had all the jams. Digging on you, digging on me.
Are you serious?
I'm serious.
Bro, I would have been crying.
I almost cried several times. And it was beautiful because I got to experience it with two close friends of mine, Whitney, who you know, and then my baby brother, Terry. And we just happened to run into him. And I was like, oh my God, we're doing this. Yeah, and Neon Trees, they played on the Saturday. I'm not really a big fan of theirs, so we just kind of hung out in the back, like, and just acted a fool, doing cartwheels, improvising in the grass, like. But people would come up to us and they'd be like, hey, like, we were the life of the party, okay? So yeah, I had a ball. Shout out to Imaginarium, who color dusted and blessed people. They like threw color dust on people and they were like, you are inherently magical, responsible. Like, they just spoke so much life, and it was like probably the highlight of my Pride weekend, just experiencing that and getting to experience that with my friends. And then shout out to my Twitter friend Jovi. We were supposed to meet last year at Pride, but things got crazy. And so we finally made it happen. We spent like the first portion of the afternoon on Saturday, and we went to this rooftop bar, and it was great. So, yes.
Sounds like a beautiful time.
It was a beautiful time. I'm so blessed. I'm so grateful. I'm so proud to be queer. Like, I'm never going back in the closet. Ever. Ever. Like, there's family waiting for you. If you are thinking, should I not? I say, come on out and join the fun. I understand, though, that it's not safe for everybody to be out. But if you can, just go ahead and do it, because, yes, all of it.
Yes.
Anyway, so yeah, that was my week.
Nice.
Nice. Okay, well, today we are talking about something that's a little deep, maybe controversial. I feel like we haven't gotten controversial in a while. So here we go. We are talking about trauma and art. Sometimes we experience art, whether that's like visual art, film, music, dance, whatever, that, brings up a variety of topics that can be traumatizing or re-traumatizing to people, depending on what you've experienced, things like that. So, and I started to think about it because When They See Us, which is on Netflix, which if you haven't seen it, I recommend, especially if you're white. Actually, if you're white, it's required viewing. Yes, that's all I'm going to say. But I was dog sitting, and the person, who had me dox it for him, he was like, feel free to use my Netflix, my cable, whatever you want. So I took that time to just like binge watch like so many shows on Netflix that week. And I started watching When They See Us, and at first I thought, I'm not gonna finish this. Like, I can't finish it. It's too much. Like, this is making me angry, because for those that don't know, When They See Us is a 4-part film, miniseries, whatever you want to call it, that is based on the true story of the Central Park exonerated 5, which, if you don't know about that case, Google it. But yeah, so it depicts the story of the 5 young boys who were wrongfully accused and convicted of raping a woman in Central Park, and were coerced and tricked into confessing to a crime they didn't commit, and spent many years in prison. One of the things I liked about the series is that it didn't just stop with, okay, they went to prison, woo woo, so sad, but it also took us on a journey of what happens when people get out of prison, especially when you've been convicted of rape, and how that just like messes up your whole life. And it wasn't until years later that the actual perpetrator of the rape admits to the crime, and then they're exonerated, and here we are today. But I say all that to say, it was very difficult watching, because knowing that, okay, this is based on a true story, so this like actually happened to them and their families, but also it's very things like this are still happening. Like, the justice system is not in favor of Black people. So it just also brought up a lot of just a lot that we're already witnessing when it comes to racialized terror and violence. So at first I wasn't gonna finish. Like, I got through the first part and I was like, this is too much. But then it was one of those situations where I was like, no, I want to see it through the end, because once I start a show, I have to like keep watching it just to see like what happens. And also it was really good, like the acting and cinematography and all of it, like it was very well done. So I pushed through, and I'm glad I did, because the end obviously has somewhat of like a hopeful sentiment, but I was crying like pretty much the whole time. So I basically like it made me question, is it possible that sometimes the art we create can go too far? Like, where do we draw the line when it comes to art? Like, presenting art, like, do we have to re-traumatize ourselves in order to get the message, And in my case, like, I personally haven't experienced a close family member going to prison for something they didn't do. I've never experienced like direct racialized violence in the way that it is like turned my world upside down. So I don't have like PTSD from anything like that. If anything, I've been a little desensitized to things like that happening. So there's that. But I wonder, like, for those that maybe have experienced something to that degree, like, what would they be experiencing if they watched a show like that? So I wanted to dive into that, and I also wanted to dive into there's another show that I think does an excellent job of presenting this discussion. So there's going to be some light spoilers ahead. So we're going to be speaking about this, at least for the first portion, through the lens of She's Gotta Have It, which is a Netflix series based on the original film, Spike Lee film. So if you haven't seen that and you don't want to be spoiled at all, maybe you should not listen to this episode. Or go watch the show and then come back and listen. Show's pretty easy to get through. Like, episodes are pretty short and there's not that many. So, and I honestly think that if you don't want to watch the entire series, but you just want to watch the specific episode, I think you'll be okay. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I would think so.
Yeah, just to, like, get context for what we're talking about without having to be fully invested in the show like we are. But yeah, so basically what happens in the episode, just to set this stage, the main character, Nola Darling, she's a visual artist and she's having an art show, and one of the pieces that she is presenting brings up some major controversy in her community. It's especially presented in which the spectator can't see it unless they go behind a curtain. And I won't spoil what the piece is. They do end up showing you what the actual painting is in the end. But I won't say what it is. But I will say that it's so jarring that it triggers many people. And people have various responses based on what they saw. Particularly Black people. And the main critique that she gets is that Black people don't need to be re-traumatized by seeing images that remind us of our historical and current oppression. And then she rebuttals it with being her way of reclaiming some of her own personal trauma as a queer Black woman. And she argues that not everything is uplifting and inspiring, and some things are dark and painful, and as an artist she wants and needs to reflect that. And so the pivotal question that I had was, who is the work for? And I think one of her friends like actually asked her that, like, who is this art for? Like, is it just for you, like, and you being cathartic, or is it meant for everybody to see, you know? So that's the first question I want to present to you, is when we make art, who's it for? And are we always mindful that what we're creating has consequences, particularly on how people receive it and respond to it?
Well, first of all, I think that this is a wonderful conversation, and the way that you just presented it just got me very excited to talk about it. So, okay, let me answer the basic question. I think it just depends on the individual. I would like to say that most people, when creating art, they think about their audience, because usually you want to reach a specific audience. Or you want a certain type of feedback, like you have an intent, and then you usually will find the audience from the intent of the piece, even if it's not thinking about the audience first, because sometimes you will think about the audience first. So it's so different, because me as an artist, I could create 5 different pieces, and it could be for 5 different audiences. Like, And I could be one of those audiences. So I don't think that you can just say, unless that is someone's actual, like, their trademark is that they specifically work for one audience, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's not a general, I mean, that's not a something you can answer, like, there's no one answer for that.
Right.
But as far as thinking about it, I would like to think that people think about, I'm kind of worried now, because now I'm like, do people not think about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll get into that.
I feel like, so I could be completely wrong. I don't know. But to think about an artist creating a work without any, like, any extra thought and, like, putting it out there and being like, this is, you know, being all proud of it and stuff. I don't know. I kind of feel like that's, like, really self-centered and prideful, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if you think about it, it's like in the same way. I would break it down to, like, the smallest form of art. Well, it depends on if it's like your job or something. But let's just take, like, a Facebook status. So many people create statuses, and, like, you naturally have an audience through Facebook, but you have a bunch of different audiences on your Facebook, depending on how you run your Facebook, what you use it for, whatever. So many people will put personal information out there, and then when people respond, when they comment, when they have some type of feeling about it, because, you know, you can also put the, I like this, the heart, crying, sad, you know, all of that stuff, they will get mad and tell people, mind your business, don't worry about me, after you've put this out there. And so I feel like that's a clear example of people just putting things out just to put it out and expecting people to not say anything or for every response to be supportive.
Right. Well,
and that's not smart.
Well, because, I mean, so in the episode, like, there was, at first when I watched it, I was thinking, why is everybody getting on her? Like, It's her art. She should be able to express what she needs to express. Mind you, at this point, we, the viewer, we don't even know what the art piece is, and it's leaving me thinking, like, what was so bad that had everybody so upset?
I just knew it was going to be, like, the worst thing on earth. I just knew it.
But, okay, without saying what it is, I personally didn't think it was that. Like, I understood that it was probably, no, not even probably. I understand that the work was disturbing and not pleasurable to see, and definitely speaks into the racial trauma that we as Black people collectively share, even if just acknowledging the generational trauma that we are a part of. So I understood that, but I think what was redeemable was that a Black woman created it. Yeah. I think I would have felt different if a white person created it. I think it's not just about what the art is, but who created it. And the fact that she defends herself to say, well, this is speaking into what we as a collective are experiencing, but it's also about my own personal trauma, and the work that she created was aiding in her healing and her development and growth, like, in spite of, or in the midst of, the trauma that she has endured. Because especially if you go back to season 1, like, I think the show kind of like glosses over that a little too much, like her being assaulted, and we really don't like get to spend a lot of time seeing how that's really affecting her. And I appreciate that in season 2, like, it's brought up again and through this art show, and like that piece is pivotal. But she also does it in a way where you don't have to look at it because it's hidden behind this curtain. And so everybody made the choice to go behind the curtain to see it. So it's not like she forced it upon anyone to see, compared to like the other art pieces that she had like on display in the show, where like if you just happen to walk around, you're gonna see the art. But this particular piece, I think she did kind of set up a boundary. I think what probably would have helped if she had provided some type of trigger warning or content warning to say, like, if you step behind this curtain, be prepared to see something that is disturbing. Prepare yourself for that. Which then made me, so then the second time I watched it, I was kind of like, okay, Nola, like, yes, this is cathartic for you and your trauma, but like the fact that you kind of maybe manipulated your audience to be like, ooh, what's behind the curtain?
Yeah, I was just
without, giving some type of heads up, like, hey, you don't have to come behind this curtain. This is a special piece that maybe is only for eyes that are ready to look at and receive something that is traumatizing. So.
Yeah, literally everything you just said. The curtain, like, everybody wants to be a part.
Mm-hmm.
Just in life in general, everybody wants to be a part. So it's like, even if she was to give a trigger warning or, whatever, there's always, if it was me, like, if I was in the gallery, like, I'd definitely be like, oh, man, like, she said, like, it's something that could, affect me, but, like, I kind of want to be affected. It's like that
mm-hmm.
thing in you that's just like, this is dangerous, but like I like the feeling of danger, and I kind of want to like feel it. It's probably gonna hurt me, but I kind of want to be hurt. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I have no idea what that is, but it's just like, it's just a part of being human. So you want to be a part of it. So I don't think. I mean, a trigger warning definitely would have been nice, but I think either way, people would have been affected and they would have their opinions regardless.
Oh, for sure. I think it was also one thing that was very pivotal was, so the show like has, certain characters like giving these, like, breaking the fourth wall, like, monologues about like their reaction to what they saw. And I was totally understanding of the various opinions of people of color, like, because even with that, like, there were different perspectives. But the one where the white girl is like, being very critical of the work and saying, like, she should not have shown that, I was kind of like, but you don't get a say.
Yeah, seriously.
Because this work isn't about you. It doesn't, and what the work is displaying, like, you don't share the heritage that this is addressing. So that also kind of made me think about how sometimes people just get all offended because they think that earns them like woke points. Because that's definitely the vibe that I got from her. Like, she's just like repeating these like social justice warrior talking points, and this like, ooh, look at me, I'm so woke. But it's like, girl, ain't even about you. Be quiet. white people need to be quiet in 2019. So I'm not sorry about it. I'm just done being apologetic about that. So but it did make me think about how, I guess that goes back into my original question of like, who is it for? And should everybody have access to your work? Just because you create something, does that mean you have to share it? Because like I said, I get that her creating the work was a pivotal moment for her to help her process and heal from her own personal experiences. But then it's like, do you have to share that with everyone else? Do you have to share that with people that you just know aren't gonna get it? How can we present work that enables people to be safe and reduce harm? Because just because you've gone through a trauma, does that mean you have to traumatize and re-traumatize your audience in order to make a statement?
Yeah. I kind of feel like, I feel like, speaking of Nola's art, I don't necessarily feel like it was necessary. First of all, I think that it was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really thought that it was beautiful. And I personally didn't think it was as bad as people reacted.
Right.
I mean, it is a show. I don't know if they really would have reacted that way. But I didn't have the reaction that they had. Most of them, pretty much. But I don't know if it's necessary. And the only reason why I say that is because I feel like a piece of that sort, okay, I gotta be careful with my words. A piece of that sort, if the intent is to keep people from becoming desensitized, which it could be really good for, then I don't think it's necessary. And the reason I say that is because we don't need art in that area. We still have it happening. Like, art with that topic, art doesn't really need to like imitate life or show life, because life is imitating life, like, over and over. So yeah, but as far as it just being an art piece to be a more packaged way of delivering that message, or just bringing awareness to the reality, I think it can be necessary, especially if white people see it.
Mm-hmm.
And the same way that you talked about, when they see us, like, white people need to see it. I think that that's something that white people would need to see, especially those who are into art. And let's be real, white people will be so open to take in some art rather than hearing a certain audience talk.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, that would be great. They're going to go to the art galleries, but they may not hang out with us, like, you know? So if that's the way that they have to hear it, if that's what needs to be made to put it in their face and be like, look, you cannot avoid this reality, then yes. But for the black people, it's not necessary.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessary, in my opinion.
Yeah. But I will say that we can't always assume, because blackness isn't a monolith, we can't always assume that just because you are black, that you just automatically have an understanding of certain specific issues that impact black people, because there are black people that, for various reasons, have lived a very sheltered life, or occupy spaces where that just truly isn't much of an issue, or they've been shielded from those issues. And so it might be necessary for Black people to see that work too, if that is their reality. And I say that because I watched it was kind of disturbing to me, but I watched this documentary on Vice that was talking about Black conservatives, particularly these Black conservatives that voted for Donald Trump. And at first I thought, oh, they're going to be talking about like older Black people, because I kind of, like, but no, these were millennials. These were people our age. And I started to question, like, okay, what kind of life do these people live? Who are they hanging out with? What is the landscape of their reality that informs their perspectives and opinions to go down this route of supporting a person that, yeah, we don't even have to go into that, but it opened my eyes to really make it tangible that, like, none of us are a monolith, and we can't assume anything. And so when I think about Nola's piece, a piece like that might be something that triggers even some Black people to say, whoa, like, this is still a thing. Like, racism is still a thing, and there's systemic oppression that is impacting everyone. I want to say that, like, it is impacting everyone. It's just impacting people in different ways. But I would say that all of us are victim to supremacy culture. It's just at varying degrees. And in this context that we're talking right now, Black people are at the highest degree of risk and harm. So I don't know. It's a fine line. Yeah. And I know that, and it's like you can question her intentions, and a lot of times we talk about, well, impact is more important than intent. But then it's like, I don't know. I guess sometimes it's just going to be unavoidable for you to disturb people. And maybe that's the other thing, is like there's a difference between being troubled and disturbed versus like traumatized. I think some people think, oh, because that offended me or that was offensive, oh, I'm triggered, now I'm trauma. Like, we love latching ourselves onto the trigger and the trauma, like, because we like to romanticize that a lot without really understanding the significance of what that actually means. Yeah. And in the process, we end up erasing people that actually are suffering from trauma and other mental health issues. So that's kind of where I was going with, like, the white girl who's like, trying to latch herself onto, oh, that was so traumatizing. Like, was it though? Or are you just offended by what you saw? Because now that you've seen this work, that is forcing you to look in the mirror and recognize that you benefit from a system that puts people of color at harm's way. And when we sit in seats of privilege, we don't want to deal with that. So, And I say this because I sit in seats of privilege in other areas, and I've had to do my own work to recognize that, like, oh, sometimes I just don't want to deal with it. It's not that I'm traumatized, I just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
Because it's easier for me to just sit in my privileged little box, instead of, like, doing some work. So yeah, we also have to tread that line too of being careful of how we categorize what we're experiencing, to not just be so quick to say, "Oh, trauma, trigger," you know. But at the same time, we do need to take people seriously when they say, you know, that traumatized me or re-traumatized me or brought up something that triggered something in me, and I need some type of self or communal care, you know. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. But so moving away from the show, because I also wanted to touch on where and I'm pretty sure you probably have to experience this type of thing, and that's within live performance, particularly with dance and theater, because in that situation, it's not just the audience that we have to be mindful about, but the performer. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, not even sometimes, a lot of times, we risk the safety of the performer and the audience, but the performer, for the sake of story.
Yeah.
You know, even with, like, shows and films, like I'm a fan of The Handmaid's Tale, and I remember season 2, there were a lot of people who their biggest complaint was it was starting to veer away from it being centered around like the story and the character development, and now it's just like a bunch of trauma porn, you know, like just presenting scenes for the sake of shock value instead of just leaving things up to our imagination, or like we can imply that this happened without actually showing you what happened. You know, it's like we get it, you know, especially when you've already done a great job of developing like the world building and the characters, and it's kind of like we don't need to like keep rehashing these violent acts, you know, for us to recognize and understand that what these women are going through in the show is, you know, terrible. It needs to be fixed. So, and then I start thinking about like, what is that like for the actors who have to, you know, portray that character, and even though it is simulated, it's like
still an experience.
Yeah, it's an experience. And I say that because when I was in college, I believe you saw that piece, my renouncing allowance piece, that was addressing rape and sexual assault and rape culture. And originally the piece was birthed from a conversation that I was having with a lot of people about modesty and the double standards between men and women. Like, why do men get to show like their bodies and it's kind of like, oh, no big deal, but when women show parts of our bodies, we're automatically sexualized and put in harm's way when we just show ourselves. And how did we get to the point of like automatically sexualizing certain parts of the body, particularly the breasts is where I was going with it. And then that kind of spiraled me into researching, and it was spiraled me on this path of like getting on like rape culture and modesty doctrines that was informing these double standards. And then because we were on a college campus, that was the same year that ISU made us take that consent course, that online consent course. And so, and there was a lot of controversy around that. And so it kind of just ended up, the piece ended up evolving into this work that was addressing not only the double standards about like how we present ourselves, but the consequences to those double standards, and that layer of the reality of the very real reality of what we are experiencing on the college campus, that rape and sexual assault is happening all the time, but it's not really being addressed. And a lot of cases on our campus, like, just going unresolved, and women and girls not being believed. So, and this is like before Me Too and Time's Up, which I think is very interesting. I wonder what the piece would have been like, or how it would have been received if I had created it today versus what was that, like 4 or 5 years ago. But in my process, I remember, like, I had 2 men in the piece, and I remember one of the men, like, saying to me, I just feel so bad, like, after doing the piece. Like, doing the piece is difficult for me because I have to tap into a darkness that maybe, like, I didn't know existed within me, or hope that isn't within me. And it's like, even though, like, what you're doing isn't necessarily real, you know, like, I tried to like don't literally push her, but like, you know, I tried to simulate as much as I could, but like, in order for him to like really be authentic to his character, like, he obviously had to dive into something very dark, that he probably wouldn't have in his everyday life. And so it made me start to question, like, am I qualified to create this work? How can I protect my dancers? And I do think that I did the best I could, but if I were to do it all over again, there are so many things that I would have done differently. And I do admit that there was a sense of pride where I was like, no, this needs to be talked about. This is an important issue, and everybody needs to like buck up and sit through the piece and watch. Like, but there was obviously a very specific audience that I think I was trying to target, and I was trying to target people that, you know, participate in victim blaming, and people who don't think that rape and sexual assault is a big deal, particularly on the college campus. But I was missing, like, okay, but I was missing the very real reality that more than likely people in the audience might be victims of rape and sexual assault themselves. And like, I didn't do my due diligence to be a little more mindful about how that might be impacting those audience members. I was mindful of how it was impacting some of my dancers, because there was a dancer that I knew of that was a victim of rape and sexual assault, and she was very involved in the process because I wanted to make sure that I was honoring her story, because I have never been raped. So, yeah. But if I could do it all over again, I honestly probably wouldn't create it at all in that setting. Just because, one, it's not my story to tell. And I believe that as artists, it's great if you want to speak into an issue, but like, if it's not your story and there is someone that you think could tell it, hand the microphone over to them. You know, like, or at the very least, have that person be heavily involved in consulting and you submit to what they say. Because I get that we have a process, and, we get so tied up in like the aesthetic of the work, but like, I wish I would have listened to more voices instead of being so caught up in like the aesthetic and like, ooh, this is gonna get people rallied up to have necessary conversations, and so I have since taken that work down. It used to be on my YouTube channel, and about a year ago I took it down because I was like, there's no, I don't want to participate in re-traumatizing people for shock value,
Yeah.
And if I were to ever revisit that piece again, it would definitely, I would definitely have a much more hands-off role in creating the work and be a lot more mindful. And since then, I've been a lot more disturbed by how we create work, particularly dance and theater, because we just get so caught up in, this is my work and this is how I want to tell it. But I'm always like, at what cost though?
Yeah. That's really interesting, and I commend you for that, because even the thought to go back and think about all of this, I feel like sometimes people create art and they let it be, and they take or deny responses at that time, but then they just kind of like walk away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it's not something that is needed for a new project. It's like the project is just done, but for you to still be thoughtful in something that was done years ago. Snaps to you.
Mm. Yeah, I think what really got me going about it is like, I feel like my last few years of college, I was very much in the creator's seat. And since being out of college, I still am creating, but I'm also more of a performer. So, it's allowed me to go back into really embody what it really feels like to be the performer, to be asked to put your body and your mind and your soul on the line for work. And since then, I've been involved in performing works that are sensitive and requires a sense of emotional labor. That if you're not in a healthy place, I would imagine to be very difficult and harmful. And then also just learning more about creative process that is a little more mindful to some of the things I was talking about, particularly because, like, with that piece that I created, there were phrases and like partner work where one thing that I would go back and do differently is to work with an intimacy and fight choreographer, director, or coordinator. So for somebody who has extensive knowledge and understanding of how to create images with the body in those things, but doing them in the safest way possible, to where the performers are safe and even the audience is safe as well. So just like learning more about that field has got my wheels turning to where I'm just so much more sensitive to, yeah, because I have personally seen the effects of when artists are not being heard, when they are saying, this, by you asking me to do this is not good for my mental health, or this is re-traumatizing me. And when they're not heard, or when those wishes aren't honored, like, it really does impact the work itself, and most importantly, it impacts the trust that you're trying to build with the performer, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know, have you experienced, whether you were in a work or you saw a work where you were like, yikes, we didn't have to like re-traumatize everybody?
I honestly don't think I have been. I don't think I've ever experienced that, but you know, I can say that with me being such a deep thinker and a deep filler, whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
I noticed that with very, very heavy things, such as, like, you know, police brutality on Black people, people of color, topics like those that can really, like, fuck you up, I do notice that I almost, like, intentionally shut down.
Mm.
And so I have moments every now and then when something happens where I like will break down about it. I'm just like so heavy from it. Like one of the very first moments that I remember, I guess either being caught off guard or just not being able to like hold it anymore, was like when it was a bunch of shootings by police, Black men mostly, I think at the time. It was like a series of Black men being killed, like, mm-hmm. day after day. Do you remember that? Like,
I remember. Yeah.
Okay. And that was like really, really bothering me, but I was like slowly shutting down because it was so much. Like every fucking day, bro. Like every day. It just was so much. And then I remember watching, I don't know why I did this, but I just remember watching Fruitvale Station.
Mm.
And that was the very first time that I ever saw it. I knew what it was about. I knew that it was a heavy movie, but I was like, this is a movie that I need to see. Like, this is, you know.
Right.
You're supposed to see this. And I watched it, and I remember that being the first time that I, like, broke down. Like, watching an old situation, that piece of art was the thing that helped me be like, I gotta be real, like, this shit hurts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll have those moments, and then I realize that I'll shut back down, and I'm just kind of angry, but in order for me to, like, I guess keep moving through life and not become so, like, bitter and just angry at random people. I choose to like be guarded in regards to those things.
Right.
Which I'm not saying is a good thing, but that's just kind of how I get along, because it's just like, I'm not saying that it's not important at all, but I have so many other things that I deal with, just like things that I'm actually experiencing firsthand, and those things weigh on me. So to let something else like that weigh on me, it's like, honestly, I feel like sometimes that type of stuff is heavier for me because I care so much about other people, sometimes more than myself. And so I'm much more quick to be like falling into a dark hole over somebody else being hurt rather than I would myself.
Yeah.
So, and then it's just the I think the natural thoughts that we all have. You see a black man around a certain age, or just in general, or a black woman around a certain age, maybe even how they look, and it reminds you of one of your family members, and you start to think like, oh, that could have been my brother, or that could have been, I try to stay away from that whole thing, like, altogether. Because that's when listen, I ain't coming to work for the next 4 days, okay?
Right.
And it's like, take the time that you need, but at the same time, like, it's just the reality, like, we have to keep moving forward. Like, you have to. So, in order for me to keep moving forward, I choose to disconnect a lot of times. Like, I know what's going on, I'm aware, but I won't spend a lot of time on it.
Right. And I mean, particularly with things like that, I mean, we don't need to, like you said in the beginning, we don't need to experience a piece of art for us to know our reality.
Yeah.
We're living in that fear all the time. Like you said, I don't need Fruitville Station to educate me on the reality that my brother, my father, my friends, every time we walk out of the house, that could be one of us.
Yeah.
And so maybe I question, like, why that film particularly, why was it created? Is it to maintain a sort of because I do think certain pieces of art like that is important, because art isn't just about reflecting the now, but it can also be a tool to preserve history. So years from now, people can go back and watch a film like Fruitville Station or a series like When They See Us, and it speak into the reality of the time in which we live now that may be reality,
Yeah.
Because, I mean, think about films from the past, like, what's that movie? Oh, God. Imitation of Life. I don't know if you've seen that. But that movie speaks a lot into issues of colorism and familial relationships and just all these intricate issues. Or plays like A Raisin in the Sun, So a lot of the themes surrounding films and plays like that are still very relevant to us today as Black people, but it also is speaking into a time that we no longer live in, but offers a perspective to help us to move forward. So I think in that regard, art like that is important, but then it's like, obviously, when a white person watches Fruitville Station, there's going to be a different level of impact, in the sense that that might be the film that informs white people to be like, oh, I didn't realize that this was such an issue, that like now I really, I mean, they'll never really get it, but like now I have a deeper level of understanding that there is a systemic problem with the relationship between Black people and the police, and that this isn't a new phenomenon but has been occurring for centuries. And we could say that about anything, not just topics of race and violence, but I don't know. In the sense, I just feel like my main question is there a way for us to tell the story without I got it. Is there a way to tell the story authentically as possible, without it being so much about the shock value and without it traumatizing the people involved in making the work, you know? And I think there is a way to do that. We just don't, a lot of us don't have the tools to do it, or we refuse to invest in the tools.
Well, what do you think the tools are? Because I can't really see how it would be possible.
Well, part of it is just like consulting with appropriate people. So, and that's going to be different depending on what you're trying to speak into. So in my case with renouncing allowance, the first thing I need to be doing is getting in touch with an intimacy director or choreographer, because there were moments where they are having to have points of contact that depict a certain level of intimacy and violence, and in a way that I as just a choreographer with dance, like I understand dance, but this is a very specific way of depicting movement that goes beyond my level of experience and education and pay grade, honestly. So coordinating with someone that understands how to display the images or integrate movement in a way that is going to be the least amount of harmful for my performers, and also the audience that is going to be witnessing this. And there are lots of intimacy and fight directors, choreographers, coordinators. They have them a lot of times for theater and film. I don't know what the landscape is for dance. That's actually something that I want to explore, because I think we assume that, because we are dancers, we understand movement. We do understand movement, but there's the mental health, emotional well-being element that we're not all qualified to speak into. So, or if I were a white person and I wanted to create a work about the killing of Philando Castile, best believe the first thing you should be doing is asking yourself, why do I as a white person need to create this work? Is there a black choreographer that could tell the story And if so, let me mute myself and do what I can do to support them in telling the story. And then if you can find a justifiable reason why, you want to create this work, maybe the first thing you should do is, if you're specifically speaking into that particular case, can you reach out to the family and make sure that that story is told authentically, and then reach out to some type of mental health professional, because like when we go into doing work that requires a level of emotional labor that goes beyond like the typical emotional labor that we may have to endure as performers, I think that's when you gotta get some professionals involved. And yes, that might mean that you might have to spend some money. And I think, to be honest with you, I think that's a huge element, is like that there are people that know this. Like, I understand people who don't know this, that don't know that those resources are available to them. But I do believe that there are some people that know that these resources are available, but they don't want to spend the time and the money to like implement these necessary things, because it's like, well, whatever. And because we're so product based now, like it's no longer about the process, but it's about the product. And there's so much pressure to just produce. And we're always trying to one up each other. So like one person creates this very impactful, important work that is like speaking into a very important issue, and now everybody's like, ooh, that got them a lot of appraisal, so now let me like one up that. But in the midst of that, we don't think about who we're harming in the process, because we're just so consumed with the product. So and honestly, this episode like is a call out to artists, myself included, to be more mindful, yes, but let it go beyond like the awareness, and let us like hold each other accountable to implement the things that we know we need to, and to not be ashamed to ask questions, and to honor our performers and our audiences.
I would agree. Definitely agree. You can't just be doing shit. That's the most basic way to say it.
Yeah.
Didn't they say that? Like, one of her friends was like, was it Shemeka? First of all, I love her name.
Yes.
Shemeka. But I think she said something to Nola about, like, not just doing shit.
Yeah. Because, yes, Shemeka was one of the friends that was kind of sitting a little bit in the nuance of it, but was, because she was saying, I support you because you're my friend and I'm always going to support your work publicly, but like personally, I'm not down with this. And I think she's really the only friend that actually holds Nola to some level of accountability. Everybody else is kind of skirting around the issue and just being caught up in their feelings. But Shemeka's like the one friend that's just like, let me give it to you straight and tell you that, like, regardless of your intention, this is how it impacted the people that were a witness to your art. And like, good for you. Like, congrats for creating this beautiful work. But it doesn't change the fact that it was harmful to some people, and you have to take responsibility for that. I think a lot of times we as artists, we just want to create shit, but we don't take responsibility for like how that's impacting people. And it's not to say that we should submit to the will of audiences all the time, because sometimes people just like don't understand art, especially art that maybe is a little more abstract. And so sometimes people are coming at it from a lens of just a lack of exposure and understanding to art in general. But then there are just some things that are just like, you know, a given. And, you know, we hide behind, well, that's just art. That's just my creativity. You know, I'm an artist. I'm sensitive about my shit. La, la, la.
Yeah.
Like, we like to hide behind that. But the reality is that, no, with whom much is given, much is required. So we have to be responsible. Create responsibly.
Yeah. I was about to say something. Shoot. Why am I losing thoughts? Oh, along with, like, just, you know, you can't just do stuff. Shemeka was saying you can't just do stuff. I think sometimes it's hard to receive that type of feedback from your friends because you just expect that they're just going to support you.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes support is seen as like me showing up, giving good feedback, saying I like it, smiling, making you feel good, and that's not always support. And so it can just be hard to hear negative feedback about your work, period. But to hear from a friend, like, I think it can be really hard too, which is why some people probably just put the shield of, like you said, it's just art, like, oh, it's not that serious. I just need it, you know, get this off my chest, whatever.
Yeah. That's very true. That did make me wonder, like, have I had friends that have come to see either work that I've created or work that I've been in that maybe, like, they didn't enjoy or were disturbed by what they saw, but they just, like, didn't say anything because we've been conditioned to believe that support equals agreement. So yeah, if you're my friend and you're listening to this, call me out, okay? Hold me accountable. Because I do want my work to create impact, and I do want it to speak into the realities in which we live. And I also understand that everybody isn't going to like it. And some, like I said, sometimes just some things are unavoidable. But at the very least, I do want my audience to be safe as they witness what they're seeing and what they're experiencing, as much as possible. And I want my audiences to have the agency to take care of themselves in the process, because I even think how we present work can inform how people are able to take care of themselves when they're experiencing art. I don't know, because, like, especially with dance, like, the whole, like, theater etiquette, like, you know, don't get up, don't do this, don't do that. It really limits, like, people's agency to be able to be like, this is not for me right now. And even, like, with money, like, performances having a level of expense where people are like, well, I paid like $60 to see this, so I'm gonna suffer through it, when you don't have to, you know?
Yeah.
So it's my hope that as I continue creating, that I can sort of create a space where people are able to witness something and then be able to process it after, which is why I appreciate shows that have some type of talk back, or so that we can talk about it and people can process like what they just saw, people can give feedback. And I encourage people to, when you do experience a show that has some type of audience participation or audience feedback, that's a perfect opportunity to hold artists accountable. Because I think we think, oh, we just need to tell them, oh, that was beautiful, that was great, And yes, we do need to celebrate them, like, job well done, like, thanks for, being vulnerable with us to share, because, that is a huge aspect of being an artist, is to be willing to be vulnerable enough to share, like, parts of yourself, in your work. But at the same time, particularly with pieces where, we're trying to speak into an issue that not only impacts you, but impacts everybody else in the world, there has to be a level of accountability there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, this is interesting. I'm glad that you're willing to have this conversation with me, because, to be honest, I try to have these conversations with other artists, like particularly dancers, and they either just like or they don't want to talk about it, or there's a level of defensiveness probably because they're guilty of some of the things that I'm talking about. And that's why I wanted to go ahead and just like say up front that I am no saint when it comes to it. Like, I've got my own work to do as well, but it's just like really hard to have this dialogue, because change is hard, because now that we're aware, now we have to make changes.
Yep.
So, yeah. Any last thoughts?
Can't just do shit. No,
right. Can't just do shit, people.
Yeah, but I mean, if I had to put it all in one sentence, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess this segues into Shameless Plug. I mentioned it several times in the conversation. I wanted to highlight an organization called Intimacy Directors International. Let me pull up let me pull this up and read to you their, if it'll let me. Okay. So Intimacy Directors International is a non-profit organization pioneering the best practices for theatrical intimacy, simulated sex, and performance nudity for theater, TV, and film. So they believe that scenes of intimacy must be handled in a professional manner that adheres to the highest standards of artistry and safety, whether that be on stage or on set. Our company utilizes the pillars as a standard for simulated intimacy. The choreography of these scenes must accurately tell the characters' stories as intended by the writer through the interpretation of the director and the actors involved, while respecting the physical and psychological safety of all. Professionals certified through IDI operate in a specific code of ethics with a high artistic standard while operating their rehearsals in professional, respectful, appropriate, and amiable atmosphere. And so they offer three or four certifications. One is for theater, one is for TV and film, And then the highest level is to be able to teach like this stuff, to be a lead instructor. So I'm going to link their website. This is just one, because Alicia, I know you asked, like, what are some of the tools? You know, this is one tool. This is one way. This is one resource. And there's like a list of certified professionals like that have gone through their program. So like if you are looking for somebody to work with, like they can direct you to somebody who's actually certified to do this type of work, so that you don't go into something that you don't know what you're doing and potentially like harm people in your creative process. Yeah, so that's one source. And once I started like looking into that, it opened me up to a plethora of other resources. So I encourage you all to look into that, especially if you work within theater or film. So yes. And then the only other shameless plug I have is Found Movement Group. We are starting up our community classes again in the summer. I taught my Mystic Flow class on Sunday, and it was a success. And yeah, just follow Found on Instagram at FMG Dance, and that's where we will announce classes, because there's no set day or time other than every other Sunday at 10 a.m. we will open up our company class to the community, but the other open community classes throughout the week just kind of varies with company member schedules. So just be on the lookout for those announcements. If you want to take class with us, we'd love to have you. Do you have anything?
I do not.
Well. So then finally, I'll just go ahead and announce this too, for the listeners. So, as you notice, we kind of flipped the script on you and released a bonus episode on a Tuesday when usually we would release a full episode. Our schedules just got really wonky, and yeah. But the rest of the summer goes as follows. After this episode in July, we're going to be doing a series on sex. So we're going to be talking about sex all the month of July. So be ready for that. All things are possible with those conversations. And then in August, we're going to be taking a little hiatus from putting out any new episodes. I'm going to try to put out maybe 1 or 2 bonus content just to, hold you over. But I won't promise that, because I will be on my vacation and then coming back from my vacation, I'll need time to recuperate. And I know that Alicia is kind of in a transition right now as well. So we want to give us like a month to just recuperate and regroup and plan out future episodes and kind of regroup ourselves to figure out like where we want to go next in the direction of the podcast. But then after that, we'll resume a regular schedule in September. So in the meantime, in the month of August, what you can do is you can catch up on all the episodes you might have missed. And we still want to talk to you. So we'll be on social media. So find us on Instagram, on Twitter. I feel like Alicia and I are on Twitter a lot for the most part. So yeah. talk to us. We'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas, if you have a topic that you want us to talk about, shoot us an email and say, hey, I really would love for you to speak into this, or what do you think about that? And if we feel called or led or qualified to speak into it, then we will. Yeah. And I am also, the other reason why we're taking a hiatus in August is I am trying to launch a website for us. So during that time, I will be working on the website. So be on the lookout for that. And that website will be a great way for you to stay in the loop of episodes, catching up on episodes, and hopefully there will be some type of resource page, because I know a lot of times we just throw out a lot of resources at you, and it would probably be good to kind of have them all in one spot. So be on the lookout for that. Hopefully that website will go live in September. So yeah.
That's it.
That's it. That was kind of a mouthful, but you know.
Well, the song of the week is Digging the Sea, Digging on You, Digging on Me, Baby, baby, oh, baby, baby, it's all like that.
It's all I got.
Gotta be in love with something like that. I'm digging the sea, digging on you, digging on me, baby, baby, oh, baby, baby, it's all like that. It's all like that. I gotta be in love. I was like me.
Yes. Yes. Shout out to TLC again.
Facts.
Oh my God. Like, I can't believe I saw, and I was kind of close. I was like, oh my God. I'm so excited. And Chicago's Pride is on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going, I hope you have fun.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were saying.
Well, and the listeners, if you're going, be safe, have fun. Let us know how it was. Take pictures, videos. I have lots of pictures and videos from Nashville's Pride. I just love Nashville's Pride because it's not just a parade, but it's also a festival. So you get to like just commune with people, you know? I don't know. Does Chicago have a festival or is it just a parade?
All I know of is a parade. I know that there are other events, like earlier in the weekend, because the parade is on Sunday.
Right.
Like Saturday. But yeah, I don't think that there's a festival. I wouldn't really know, honestly. But I've never heard of a festival, basically.
Mm.
I just love the parade, and then there are like other events and like I think different like bars and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we have different events like leading up to Saturday and Sunday, but I feel like it's like you want to go to the festival, and like there's different vendors, and you know, so a lot of it is very corporatized, like, but there are like a lot of local organizations there that are represented. Like there was a vendor that was offering free HIV testing. And like Cigna was out there doing free health screenings. And then there were like other health organizations there that like were giving out information about PrEP and other forms of like good like sexual health practices, and obviously there's like performances and stuff all throughout the day, and they try to get like 1 to 2 like major headlining people to perform like the last set of the day. So Neon Trees was on Saturday night, and then TLC closed us out on Sunday. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like when it's just about the parade, it kind of it can kind of water down the meaning of pride, because then it's just like a bunch of corporate logos everywhere. But I don't know. It's still an experience, and it's still a good way to like connect and commune and celebrate. So yeah, I hope everybody that goes has a great time, because I had a grand old time here in Nashville. So yeah.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation.
As always.
That is all.
That is all. Be blessed.
We want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. Continue the conversation with us. Develop a community with other misfits and mystics like us, and get your latest updates on Shameless Plugs and other news by following us on social media. We are on Instagram at Misfits and Mystics Pod, Twitter at Misfits Mystics, and we also have a Facebook page that you can like and share.
Want to reach us directly? Shoot us an email at misfitsandmysticspod@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you, and with your permission, we might give you a shout out on future episodes.
Don't forget to subscribe on whatever streaming service you're using to stay up to date on newest episodes being released.
Leave us a review on iTunes to help us gain more visibility. Plus, we appreciate the feedback.